Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kelnick.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100, every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to Politics with Sam and Anne, the podcast that gives you everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes, whether we're working from home, out on the road or generally on our travels.
It's Wednesday, February the 12th. I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico with Sam Coates of Sky News. And Sam, I see you're not in your usual spot at home with that lovely fire behind you. You've gone somewhere exotic, haven't you?
I've gone to McElvoy at Homelands up in the northeast. That's right. The story of this year, as we talked about, is growth. And you're not going to find growth in Westminster unless it's around your waistline, are you, Keir? So I'm on my travels and I've been trudging through the absolutely freezing tundra around Teesworks to look at a new gas-fired power station that they're about to build. Now, you might have thought that Britain was going green by 2030, but they're going to put a carbon capture and storage device bolted on it to make it green. Does this all work? Well, that's what we're up here investigating. It's absolutely fascinating what's going on in the sort of hunt for growth and keeping the lights on up here. But that meant, Anne, that I was out of Westminster and my natural habitat for the big event that I'd frankly been looking forward to for quite a while, which was the book launch of Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pilgrim's Get In. You were there last night. What was it like?
Well, yeah, exactly. I do the parties well. Sam does the hard yards, looking at, going to Teesside to look at energy supplies. It was a bit like one of those episodes of The Reunion from the last very eventful Parliament, Sam. There was that sense of the big names who really shine in this book. Morgan McSweeney is the great Svengali behind Keir Starmer, not there. People who were clearly driven the plot of this book couldn't really be seen. To be there, to be like putting your hand up and saying, hey, I'm a source. But it was a good mixed room. I was chatting to Nigel Farage's advisor, Dan Jukes. Seamus Milne was there from the old Corbyn team. There were ex-Tory spads galore, all of whom seem to be in public affairs. So public affairs is clearly going for growth. I didn't know there were enough jobs to go around. And Labour sources and advisors skulking and chatting to each other. Nice speeches about working as a twosome on the project from the authors, a bit like this.
I just want to ask one question about the book, Anne, because we've read the extracts. I'm looking forward to reading the whole thing. And you mentioned Keir Starmer's chief of staff there, Morgan McSweeney, who kind of plays a very large part in the way some people tell our political story. Is it healthy that we put advisors at the centre of the political story that we tell? Certainly some people do, and Morgan McSweeney, from what we've seen from the extracts, plays a sort of at points all controlling role in steering the political project that has Keir Starmer as a host. Is that a good thing for our politics? It seems to happen quite regularly. We had it with Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson. Have we got things the right way up in the way we do our politics, or is it just in the way that we tell things?
I wondered that when I was reading Get In, to what extent was this a device or is it the truth? Is the truth that Morgan McSweeney really is the character who has created Keir Starmer, finds this unpolished diamond in the rough of Labour politics after the Corbyn years and decides to make him leader? That certainly is the narrative, and it is well borne out by this story. So I guess it depends if that is more the truth than not the truth, and that this is driven by the advisor, then why not? But I know exactly what you mean. I think we have a fascination, and it's there in the slight self-mythologizing of Dominic Cummings as Britain's Elon Musk or whatever it is, that these are characters who really drive things behind the scenes. And sometimes you almost lose sight of the principle, don't you? You lose sight of the Prime Minister and what's driving him or her. But we seem to love it. I think they're onto something.
I definitely do. I've certainly heard firsthand how Morgan McSweeney was the driving force behind using Keir to get rid of, sort of draw a line under the Corbyn era. But I also think that the thing that the book charts quite cleverly is there is an absence in a lot of ways where politics should be inside Keir Starmer. You just don't see it as often as you perhaps would have done with previous leaders. And maybe that makes him flexible and ruthless. Maybe that's a big flaw because it means that the government doesn't have a direction. We're sort of going to find the answer to that over the next 3 or 4 years. Listen, we better get on with what's going on today. I'm up here hunting for growth in Teesside, but growth is the main story, as it so often is on this podcast and in our politics. And so I wanted to start with, really quite a punchy scoop that emerged from Bloomberg that's going to drive today and tomorrow. And that is that the Bloomberg team got the first tip-off, the first kind of indication of what's coming in the forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility. Now, let me just recap on the story so far, because it's always complicated and it's worth doing. So, Rachel Reeves, when she came in, set herself very, very, very challenging limits on what she can borrow to make the government function. By 2029, she decided she can't borrow anything at all to fund day-to-day government spending. So she can borrow if she wants to invest in big, shiny projects, but not to keep the lights on in government. So all of it has to come from taxation. And she keeps telling us that this, which is known as her fiscal rule, her self-imposed fiscal rule, is non-negotiable. And the OBR, Office of Budget Responsibility, twice a year says whether or not she'll meet this promise. And the next time they do that is March the 23rd. Now, the OBR give the Chancellor a lot of advance warning what they're going to say. And the Treasury already know where the OBR look like they might come out. And Bloomberg have got a flavour of what's coming. And Bloomberg say that Rachel Reeves is going to be judged to have broken that rule, that in 2029 the forecast is that she's spending too much to rely on tax alone to keep the lights on in government. And so, in their words, she will face a small deficit. And that means that she's almost certainly going to have to squeeze spending rises next month ahead of the budget-setting spending review, which we now know is on June the 11th. This is important, and because it means that budgets are going to be squeezed in the years to come. That will dismay many Labour folk who think that the point of Labour is to be able to dish out a bit more money. It's going to mean hard-pressed public services, particularly in non-protected areas like justice, some areas to do with the Home Office and the environment are going to be particularly squeezed, and it's going to put pressure on government ministers to increase the pace of their reform plans. It's all round tricky.
All round tricky is a bit of an understatement, I think, on this one. Just listening to what you're saying, I'm rather glad you got to do that summary, not me, because it is quite complicated. But it comes down to the fact that in the end, this was self-imposed. These rules, the so-called ironclad fiscal rules, were there as a kind of girdle around the Labour plans for when they came to office, and that they could be trusted on spending. It got them over the line very well at the election, but it now probably feels a bit like that girdle is pressing in on the Labour body politic, and that is borne out, I think, by what we're seeing in this Bloomberg story today. I think for Rachel Reeves, it comes at a time when, one, she wants to push ahead, and we're going to talk about some other aspects of her growth agenda, Sam, that I think you're going to talk to us about. But if you look at the latest projections, it also looks like anything that is growth creeping back, a tiny little uplift predicted by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, 0.3 percentage points, is, as they put it, reported in our playbook this morning, only likely to be a temporary boost for the economy. So we're sort of still waiting for that moment when it looks like whatever Rachel Reeves has put in place is actually going to lead to what she said it was going to lead to.
This all should come out in the wash again tomorrow when we've got GDP figures. And normally, and you are able to, or certainly economics editors are able to quiz the Chancellor about all of this, because when GDP figures come out, normally they put up the Chancellor. So it'll be interesting to see if she turns up for that, or maybe if she doesn't, with whether we should read in to that something tricky, because there's a big kind of story problem, a big narrative problem looming with the OBR, because if she ends up missing her forecasts, it'll be less because the cost of borrowing has gone up. We talked about that lots of times since the budget in November. But the rate, the sort of yields have come down a bit. The cost of government borrowing has actually eased off a bit. If she ends up having missed her target, it's going to be because the OBR did a downgrade on growth. And there are some people who think it's very hard for them not to do a downgrade on growth, given what other economic forecasters have done. But that is a big call for the OBR. I'm sure quietly the Treasury are arguing / pleading not to make not to make a big massive judgment this side of the budget, because she is constrained in the spring statement. She can't raise taxes. She said that she's not going to do that in order to meet her fiscal rules. But just a big downgrade by the OBR, sort of 9 months into 8 months into office, is exactly the reverse narrative from a government that said it wanted growth at all costs. The one thing that the government can always point to now when they talk about growth is a third runway at Heathrow, and there's a development on that today, Anne.
Yes, indeed there is, and it is all about Heathrow and the expansion that is promised of Heathrow, I think symbolically for other airports too. Thomas Wolby, the CEO of Heathrow, is speaking this morning, and he'll be saying that a third runway is critical for the country's future economic success. That is absolutely the message that Rachel Reeves wants to hear, and the government having put their weight behind it. These things are always controversial when it comes to big building plans around airports and the inevitable destruction. And he's going to be confirming privately funded investment plans to upgrade the airport in the meantime. So it looks as if something is moving and people will actually see some improvement. And Sam, as we were talking about the impact of Donald Trump's tariff threat on UK steel, he's going to sign a charter to use British steel in the construction project. So it's interesting to see. You can join the dots, can't you, between these different stories, but it comes to the fact that we're trying to get some message out at home, or the government, I should say, to get some message out at home that these things are linked, they have a plan, and it's linked up with industry.
So you can listen to Wolby's words this morning at 11 a.m. But actually, what I'd recommend everybody does is look at a map, and there's one in the Times today of exactly what these Heathrow plans are going to look like. And my goodness, on one level, it's quite exciting. There's, the new runways, there's lots of new terminals. But I just looked at the proposals that are being set out by Heathrow and being kind of, given flesh today. And I thought, my goodness, we're a long way away from anything happening. Because when you look at the map, it says things like proposed 1.2 mile M25 realignment. Now, if residents of in the southeast of this podcast knew anything about the tiny tweak to the M25 that was done around the A3 in Surrey, around I think it's Wisley, they'll know how a relatively minor change to Britain's circular, London's circular trunk road is nigh on impossible. And then it goes, M25 would go under runway. So they're going to dig a tunnel for the M25 to go under this. Right. Now, that feels to me 15 to 20 years off, not 5 to 10 years off. We are looking a long way and an awful lot of consultations before anything happened. The villages of Harmondsworth and Longford to be bulldozed. As ever, I don't have a view on whether this should or whether this shouldn't happen, but my spidey sense says for all of the government's rhetoric that they are taking on the blockers in order to get Britain building, this is going to be a hell of a long project in its inception before a single shovel goes in the ground.
Great minds think alike, or whatever, but in the playbook, there's a nice thing this morning from us at Politico. Are we the blockers? Pointing out that 60% of the public think that building a third runway is the wrong priority. They got that for a scoop from a YouGov poll by climate charities. And to your point, Sam, there's a risk that you now start to see climate charities and others, and of course local interests there. Not everybody loves to have a major airport building expansion on their doorstep or on their road outside, whether they go in and out of where they live. And you're getting the sort of pushback already, but your gains are so far in the future. Now, that is inevitable. In fairness, one should say the government, that's inevitable. And that happened the last time this was on the agenda, because I can remember Ruth Kelly having to front this up under Gordon Brown. And it does feel like the same story. But frankly, if that had gone ahead, I suppose it would have been built by now. But here we are, and we're looking into another 20 years or so. Are we being a bit negative? Is it the government and Rachel Reeves particularly saying you do have to have a direction of travel, if you will forgive my takeoff metaphor? If you didn't try to do something like this, well, you would be accused of not really keeping Britain involved in the global economy, and you do need sort of in and out flights to do that. I mean, I say I'm also not taking a view on this, but I think at some point someone was going to have to make a kind of decision on airports. The government might say, well, we are prepared to go with it, but the gains a long way down the line.
I think that the ultimate test will be whether they name the terminal after Rachel Reeves in 20 years' time. Whether they call Terminal 6 or whatever is the Reeves terminal. Let's see. You are going to need plenty of airport capacity so that the new head of the Borders and Immigration Watchdog can get in and out of the country. How's that for a segue, Anne? Because the government today really, really want us to talk about immigration. And I've got some great news for the government, which is that immigration is the story on the front page of the Daily Mail, splashed all over it. The bad news for the government is it's not the story about how they're going to deny citizenship for people who come over on small boats, adopting, I think, effectively a Tory plan. And it's not the news that they are going to sort of fight and to stop people from Gaza coming to the UK using the Ukrainian resettlement homes, which the Home Office is very insistent and adamant that won't happen this morning. Instead, it is a story about where the person who's going to oversee our borders actually lives.
This is John Tuckett, who worked as Immigration Services Commissioner for 6 years, so he has a very solid background. When he was quizzed on his confirmation in this role at the Home Affairs Select Committee on Tuesday, as view to being the next independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, it emerged that he lives in Finland. Which is
brilliant country. I love that. I'll be there next week.
Which is a brilliant country. Sam Coates is going there next week on a royal visit. But the point here being that it's quite a long way from the discussion about borders and borders security in the UK. He has a family home in Finland, he explained. He says, I come to this country whenever I need to. Asked how he would inspect UK borders while being resident in Finland. He said, well, I work in the UK and I come to the UK, but I am resident in Finland. I pay my own travel and accommodation, which is, in a sense, a reasonable description of how he manages his working life. But my goodness, it really pushes the definition of work from home. And I'm not sure it's quite the impression of that on it every minute, looking at the safety and the security of Britain's borders, is that it's happening, I don't want to say from Lapland, because I don't know where Mr. Tuckett lives, but it just has that sense of being a bit far away, doesn't it?
I think his family home's a bit further south than that. Look, I think it's a brilliant thing for a couple of reasons. First of all, Mr. Tuckett will, as a result of living in Finland, know exactly how a well-functioning, straightforward immigration process and a well-functioning airport can work, because the Finnish airports are the best I've ever been to. The Helsinki airport in Vantaa is a model of how you can be effortlessly moved through immigration, which you need to do since Britain is no longer in the European Union. You need to get your passport stamped, and he can see how it's done there, and maybe he can bring a bit of that Finnish efficiency back to the UK. And of course, when it comes to Finnish borders, they border Russia. So Finland, which still has conscription, you do famously have people from the Finnish military who dress up in essentially snow camouflage to patrol the borders with Russia, and have some of the highest tech borders to make sure that people don't creep across their very long border with Russia. And if you go too close, by the way, you have to surrender your passport to make sure that you don't hop over into Russia. There are all sorts of things you can learn from Finland to import back into the UK to make our own border system and border security a bit better. So lots to learn Whether we'll end up being as efficient and clean and fast and in our immigration processes as Finland, I don't know, but we can always hope.
It's definitely 12 points. Well, there goes the bell. It's 12 points from Sam for the Finnish entry, isn't it?
Absolutely. OK, I've got to go and trample around Teesworks a little bit more and try not to get pneumonia. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.